At false dawn the city lay smudged and silent across the river, its walls a line of dull teeth clenched against the sea. Between the armies and those teeth lay the mist. It had rolled up from the Blackwater in the night like something birthed from the deeps, swallowing piers and warehouses and the rotting hulks that creaked softly at their moorings. A gull cried and the sound fell flat, as if the mist were a great sleeping thing whose breath muffled all noise and drew the world into itself. Robb Stark stood with one hand on Grey Wind's neck and watched the city breathe. The wolf's pelt, damp with dew, smelled of cold iron and river mud. Beneath Robb's palm, the muscles shifted, alive with that coiled stillness that comes before a leap. He could feel the wolf's pulse through the flesh, and under that, the tremor of his own. "You'll wear a hole in the ground if you keep shifting so," said a voice nearby. Brynden Tully loomed out of the mist, his cloak dark as a hole cut in fog. The blackfish had the sort of stillness that made men around him straighten their spines. He had a way of speaking in low tones that never felt like caution and never fell short of command. Robb did not answer at once. The river lapped under the bank where they stood. Somewhere to his left a horse stamped and shook itself, a sound of leather creaking and harness jingling that seemed indecently loud. The night air tasted of wet canvas, smoke ground into wool, and the faintly sour smell of a city long used and ill-kept. The dawn light picked out the broken smoke of hearths behind the walls, a promise of kitchens and cups of small beer, of the ordinary lives sheltered by stone and oath. He had been 2 years and some months in a world without such ordinary days. King, they called him. It felt tonight like a word he had put on badly, a cloak that slid off his shoulders when he did not watch how he carried himself. His father had been lord and something more, and that something more had been like the marrow in a bone, unseen and essential. Robb understood the shape of it without being able to name it. He could not put it on as one puts on a surcoat or a crown. He could only try to live near it. Grey Wind's ears angled forward. The wolf's breath came in short bursts, sampling the scents. Robb rubbed the ruff along the spine, calming him, as much to soothe his own heart as the animal's. "They're there," Robb said finally. "Behind that gate, behind those towers. All cities are until they're not," Brynden said, quiet. He moved closer, and Robb heard the scrape of his boot over a stone and the steadying breath that followed it. A sound so small that only a silent hour could hold it. "Our friends will open when the bells strike prime." "If they are our friends," Robb said. Brynden made a soft sound that might have been agreement. "If they are," he said. "They have their own skins to think of. So do we." Caitlin came through the hush like a woman who had learned to make a silence move around her. She had dressed as if for travel rather than battle, layers under her cloak that could turn with the day and last through 2 days more without sleep. Her hair, freed of pins, had begun to show the streaks of frost that grief lays on a woman before her time. Her eyes were steady and held the shore of her son's face as if by looking she could bind it to this moment, keep it from floating into the pageant of memory where men you loved went and did not come back. "We could still turn from this," she said softly. "We could send our men back to the fairest fields of their lives." "We could," Robb said. He had sounded those words in his own head many times, with many voices. In some of them he had been a boy, and in some a king, and in some nothing but a pair of hands. "Or we could go forward and find the fields these men have earned." His mother's mouth softened as if it would speak his name and then remembered itself and did not. She had broken something that could not be mended when she freed the Kingslayer. She knew it and he knew it, and they both lived with the knowledge the way a mason lives with a missing finger. You learn what your hand can still do. You do not expect what is gone to be returned. Your father would have said there is no good in hoping those inside a city will remember mercy, she said. He would have asked you to remember it first. He nodded. The command had already gone out. Broken men or boys or thieves who slit purses on the street of silk were not to be hanged where they were found. Soldiers who yielded were to be given quarter. No burning for burning's sake. No sport made of terror. If the city came to them, they would hold it. If it did not, they would take it as a man takes a thorn from his own skin, without relish. He had told his captains, and the captains had told their hundreds, and the words would be tested in the mouths of men in an hour. "We wrote the oath to the small folk into our plan," he said. "I will write it again if I must." Her hand lifted, a small motion, and for an instant he was certain she would touch his cheek as she had when he was a boy with a fever. But the hand fell, and she folded it into her cloak. "Then go," she said. "Go and keep that word." He felt the prayer in it like a warmth near the heart. He nodded again, and the blackfish's presence, solid and spare, moved with him as he turned. Gray wind patted ahead, the mist curling around him. In it, the wolf looked almost like a thought. Men drew back to let Robb pass. They were river lords and northmen, their beards beaded with damp, their breath making little clouds in the air, their eyes high and far. The Gretchen's laugh sounded once and turned back into the fog and hid there. Lord Karstark's mouth looked like something carved from iron. Roose Bolton stood with his head slightly cocked, as if listening to a music others could not hear. A pale eye, a polite blink, a mouth that made no promises and remembered Emusi. He had knelt like the rest under the pine boughs when Robb had been crowned, and he had stood very close in a way that seemed like fealty and something else besides. Robb gave him a nod that was exactly what courtesy required. Bolton's response was a bow of equal measure, and he stepped back as if to clear the way for destiny. "Prime," Brynden said quietly. The edges of the city had begun to acquire definition. The towers stood apart from the walls, the crenellations grew their shadows. Somewhere a bell sounded tentative as a child. Then another answered, truer, and then they were all calling at once, the sound going up into the air and falling back into stone. A boy ran up with a helmet too large for his head and held it with both hands to keep it from knocking his ears. His eyes were the clear, stinging blue of a cold morning. Robb took the helm, set it on his brow, and felt the familiar constraint of steel and leather and the sudden hollowing of his hearing, as if the world had turned to breath and blood and one voice speaking inside his skull. "Now," said the blackfish. The signal was a banner lifted and turned, a wolf on winter white with a fish below it, the two beasts chained by design and blood. On the river, 3 skiffs as low as shadows unmoored and began to drift. The men inside hunched and quiet, oars barely whispering against the water. At the same moment, from the line of warehouses where night soil men came and went, a postern gate opened and closed again quickly, as if the city had exhaled, and quiet figures slid along the wall. Across the river, the mud gate stood fat and unlovely. It had seen riot and fire and the push and heave of siege ladders in other seasons. It wore the history in its soot and chips. Robb watched the archway as a hunter watches a foxhole, knowing that patience and readiness are the same muscle used 2 different ways. The line of the chain, if there was a chain, was invisible in the mist. He had been told the boom was down. He had been told men with paper antlers under their hats had the watch. He had been told many things by men who would be safe or dead before anyone learned which of those things were true. The first skiff slid under the shadow of the gate. A heartbeat held and held. Then from the near tower there came a soft clatter as of a ladder knocked into place. A man coughed. It sounded horribly loud. No horn twitched. No flame leapt in sudden alarm. A second boat eased forward, and then a third. The mist moved, lifting like veils on the wrists of dancers, and a shape resolved at the parapet, leaning, peering down. Barristan Selmy would have known in a heartbeat how to answer such an hour. But Barristan Selmy had gone from this city in disgrace. There were still men who knew how to be soldiers inside those walls, but there were more who knew how to be careful. Care had saved as many lives as courage in the last year. Gray wind made a sound in his throat too low for any man without his hand on the wolf to hear. It was not quite a growl. It was not quite a sigh. The gates moved. Robb saw it first in the shift of shadow, a brightness sneaking along the seam where the 2 massive leaves met. Then the groan came, wood complaining against wood, iron pulling at itself, and the smell of the river freshened as if the city were drawing breath for the first time in a long while. "Go," said Brynden, and then Captain Reed's hand lifted, and the first column of men began to move. Green sleeves and rivergrass sigils slipped into the damp, their feet hardly whispering in the churned earth. Northmen followed with their wolfsheds flapping, And then came the men Robb had learned to call by 100 names, the prickers and outriders, the best of the hill clans with their strange chants under their breath, the quiet men who'd learned in the green bogs where to put a foot and how to take a life without complaint. He heard the murmured cadence of prayer in the old tongue and the newer cadence of the 7 supplicants layered over it like one river's surface crossing another. The mud gate's passage was a tunnel of old breath and old blood. The stones were freckled with stains laid down in a dozen kings' reigns. The smell inside was the odor of every city. Piss and smoke and yeast and animals in fear, the green water and dead fish and tallow and old wine. Robb's horse shied at the dark and the sudden closeness, and he reached down and steadied the animal with a hand on the neck. Gray wind slunk ahead, the tip of his tail low, his head carried in that manner that says to those who know wolves, "Do not be fooled by my posture. Every inch of me is a weapon." And then the city was all around them, the lower streets like veins, narrow and damp, noises starting, voices beginning to wake and crack apart under fear. A woman cried out once, perhaps from surprise at the sight of soldiers come like weather, and then the cry was smothered, whether by a hand, a wall, or prudence. One could not say. A boy with a basket of oysters froze in his running, the shells clacking, his mouth a little O of astonishment before he bolted down an alley too thin for horses. "Left," Brinden murmured, "to Fishmonger's Square and then up. Keep them from spreading. Keep them together." A hiss of arrows took 2 men on the flanks from a window where nobody had seen a body until there was a bow there. The archers who had come forward with the first wave sent their reply without needing the order, shafts flickering into the window's mouth as if to sew it shut. A figure tumbled out and fell, boneless, into a barrel too small to hold him. Someone muttered about ill luck. Brinden glanced up and then away. In the next street, a cart lay on its side shedding onions. The smell was sweet and rotten at once, and the onions burst under iron feet with wet pops that sounded like the breaking of pods. Robb felt the city on his skin the way you feel a fever rising. It watched from doorways and behind shutters. It waited to see what kind of men they were. He caught the eye of a man standing with his back against a wall, a butcher judging the weight of men as if they were cuts. Robb lifted his visor and let the man see his face. The butcher's gaze flicked to gray wind and down again to the ground. Slowly the man lifted his hand and touched his own brow as if saluting a thing that might bring him luck or ruin. Robb lowered the visor and the world narrowed to the bar of the sight and the 3 breaths inside the helmet. They moved like a scythe through low barley, a curve held tight by a steady hand. Men on the edges wanted to dart, to cut, to make of this fever a rage, but the center held them in, the blackfish's presence like a stake in the field around which the motion went smooth. The bells were still making their high noise, and then beyond the fish market Robb heard the deeper boom of the September's great bell lowering its voice into the city's chest. Somewhere, a drunk sang a snatch of a love song and stopped as if his heart had failed. And above, past the tangled roofs and jerking chimney pots, the red keep looked down like a keep does, with the still regard of a creature that believes itself beyond the theme of men. Its brick took the new light and made it cruel. The high windows of Mager's Holdfast were pale. Robb wondered if women had gone there already with children and jewels, to wait inside the stone. He had been told once that the worst prison is the room you make for yourself. In the yard of a small sept on the way to the street of steel, a hedgerow knight in old mail knelt with his head bent and made the sign of the mother without taking his eyes off the men who went by. When Robb looked at him, he lifted his chin in a way that asked a question without words. Robb had no answer to give that did not require the day to play its hand out. He touched the hilt of his sword lightly in acknowledgement of the man's courage and fear, and they went on. At the turn by the moneylender's house, there was a barricade of tables and chairs held together with rope and hope. The men behind it wore oddments of armor and had the city watch's cloaks thrown over their shoulders as if that would make them stand more easily. The captain's bald head shone like a mushroom in the damp. He had a scar that ran through his brow and cut his right eyebrow in half, and his eyes were the color of dirty honey. "Halt!" he called, his voice a rasp. He held his halberd loosely, as if he had spent years holding it in that hand and could not remember how to set it down. Robb raised his visor again. He did not shout. Sound behaves badly in such places. It ricochets and grows. He let the silence carry his words. "Stand aside and be counted as men of the city," he said. "Raise your weapons and be counted with those who made you starve." The captain looked left and right. The men behind him kept their eyes on his back as if it was the only thing keeping them on their feet. Far away, a baby cried. Somewhere nearer, a dog barked and was silenced. Whether by fear or a boot, Robb could not tell. The captain lifted his halberd straight up and set it down on the cobbles. "I have 2 daughters," he said to no one in particular and everyone at once, and stepped back from the barricade. The men behind him followed him as if they had simply discovered that their legs worked. One man let his spear clatter. Another made a sign against evil on his chest and looked embarrassed by his own hands. "Take their halberds," Brynden said to the men beside him. "Give them back later if they deserve them." Behind that barricade, the streets began to incline. The Red Keep's hill rose like a calf muscle flexing under skin. They passed the Street of Sisters and the pale faces of brothel women watching with their painted mouths like wounds. They passed an armorer beating a blade for nobody and then stopping, the hammer in the air. They passed a cooper's shop smelling of oak and river water and pitch. A bed hung to air from a window. A boy's toy horse toppled in the gutter and swelling with water. A hiss of footfalls behind them, the clothes-run patter of someone catching up. Robb half-turned in his saddle and saw small John Umber grinning as a man grins when he knows his strength and the day both belonged to him for a little while. There was blood on his cheek dried in a track from the corner of his eye, but he laughed as if tears were for another man in another life. "Fishmonger Square is ours," he said. "So is the riverside. We found your paper antler friends trying to look like men without their hats. They've got more courage than sense." "How many?" Brynden asked. "Enough to open 2 gates and keep their skin if we're lucky. Not enough to keep it if we're not." Robb nodded. "Keep the men tight," he said. "No grabbing, no running. If you see old women, put them on porches. If you see boys, send them home." Small John blinked, as if the idea of putting old women on porches was stranger than killing 3 men with a half-pike, then nodded. "Aye, your grace," he said with happy sacrilege, and pounded away, bellowing Robb's words down the line. They were at the barbican below the Red Keep when the first organized resistance showed its face. The royal household guard had dressed themselves finely, and their plumes and gilded bits looked like finery in daylight and a kind of bright sickness in the mist. They drew across the way in a clean line, shields rim to rim, the curve of it elegant and formidable. The captain there had a voice built for command and used it properly. "By order of the king," he shouted, "throw down your arms and lower your standards, and you shall have pardon. Advance and be treated as traitors to the crown." Robb took off his helm this time and hung it on his saddle bow. He wiped his face with the back of his glove, smearing the dew and sweat and the oily trace of another man's kitchenesse. "Moke." He raised Longclaw. No, not Longclaw, that was another boy's sword in another life. He raised his own blade and rested the point against his stirrup. "Whose crown?" he said. "Whose order?" He spoke as if the answer might be interesting. Someone down their line laughed in a hard way, and Brynden's glance cut down the laughter like a scythe. The captain of the household guard shifted in his saddle, a small human motion that said more than words. "These men may not be the rabble we were told they were." "King Joffrey's order," the captain said. "The king's peace holds." "Does it?" Robb said, and smiled a little without pleasure. "Tell the king that Robb Stark asks the peace's price. He has the making of it in his hand. He has had it for a long while." He saw the moment the captain made his choice. The man's chin lifted half an inch. Fear flicked across his face in a very quick ripple and was corrected. "Archers," he said to his own, and the first flight sang. Brynden's horse moved as the blackfish moved, their bodies one thing. His shield flogged up and took a shaft that shuddered like a harp string. Their own archers answered, clean and methodical, each arrow a sentence in a language all men in such places know. The household guard braced for a charge that did not come. Robb had no wish to throw his men into a hedge of spears in a narrow way when the city around them housed 1,000 open doors. He signaled left, quick and sharp, and men peeled off, foretasting a flanking that would make that pretty curve of shields an ugly hassle. But before the flanking could bite, a side door in the barbican opened and a man in a brown robe and a neat, clean face stepped out like a thought. His hands were empty and well-kept. "Sir Robb," he said, using a title that fit no law and several habits. "If you'll speak a moment." Robb had never in his life seen Varys, but he knew him as surely as if he had been a house in Winterfell with its own smell. He knew him by the silence that moved around him, the way minds in the immediate area seemed to adjust themselves to the presence of a new gravity. Brynden gave the eunuch a look that believed in steel. "You'll speak from there," he said flatly. "You will not step closer." "Of course not," Varys said gently. His eyes were soft, and if they were frightened, the fear was like perfume, a delicate veil added for effect. "You must be tired, Your Grace. We are all tired, and tired men do foolish things. Please do not ask your men to do a foolish thing here. The holdfast is meant to resist foolishness." Robb sat very still on his horse. The smell of the city was stronger here. Briars and old sweat and something scorched that might be regret. Gray wind's hackles lifted a finger's breadth. "Why do you speak to me?" Robb said, level. "Because other voices sought to do so and failed," Varys said. "Because other voices in other parts of the city have found themselves regrettably tied or gagged or far away. Because I read the numbers and yours are better this morning. Because mercy spoken in time is half a day's fighting saved. Because a queen and a king and a girl who prays to anyone who will listen are behind that door. And because you are a brother." Robb registered the last word like a touch on a bruise. "Sansa," he said before he could catch his own voice, came out like a thing taken by surprise. "The Lady Sansa," Varys breathed. "Yes, she is in the holdfast. The Queen is with her. The Queen is very much with her. There are other ladies. There is the King. And there are men who will die for the wrong reasons in 10 heartbeats if we are not careful." "Open," Brynden said crisply. Varys' smile had a weary kindness in it that ached, whether it was true or not. "You ask me for what I want to give you," he said. "But I am a man of professions. I must make the act look like the thought. If we can come to terms here, I will show you how to ask for the door to be opened in such a way that the door keeps its dignity." "You will show me how to open a door," Brynden said deadpan. "I thank you, Master of Whisperers." Varys' eyes rested on the Blackfish a heartbeat, something like respect there. Then they returned to Robb. "We have the King," Robb said. He said it to hear how it sounded. It sounded absurd and near and shaped like a knife. "You have the city," Varys said softly. "The King is a boy with a mouth. What matters is how you close his mouth. If you close it with blood today, you will be king of a city that must be taught every day to breathe. If you close it with terms, you will be king of a city that will feed you." "Terms?" Brynden said, as if tasting the word for poison. "Terms are an arm you can use later," Varys said. "Blood is a hand you cannot put back." A stone from the family of stones that have no home ticked into the ground at Robb's horse's hoof. It had a message tied to it with a dirty ribbon, a plebeian method that made men remember the city was also a village. Brynden stooped, swift, took the note, and unfolded it without flourish. "From Reed," he said. "The street of steel is ours. The watch is yielding piecemeal. No fire set yet except one near the hook. He can cut the barbican from behind if need be." Robb looked past Varys to the iron-bound door in the flank of the barbican. He thought of Sansa in some room behind it, of her hands, of the songs she had learned, of the way she must have learned by now how to listen through stone. He thought of Catelyn's eyes. He thought of Tywin Lannister's long shadow sailing on a road from the west like a storm seen from a hill. "Your terms," he said to Varys. "Say them quickly." Varys spread his hands, an empty gesture, an exquisite surrender. "The Queen will accept safe conduct to wherever you choose to send her, Old Town, perhaps. She will not accept the Tower alone with the boy. Put her somewhere where she can be watched and can speak to those you wish her to speak to." "The King." "The boy," Brynden said. "The boy," Varys agreed. "He must kneel. In the September, He must be made to kneel, but not broken. People will love a child more than they will love any of us. Take his love from him loudly, and it will echo back. Take his name softly, and they will be grateful. Take his name, Robb repeated. The crown, Varys said, as if explaining to a child something painful but necessary. The thing that rests on his hair. Take it from him and set it aside. You need not put it on your own head, not here. A city that has watched that crown burn once will sleep better if it watches it go to a shelf and rest. And after, Brynden said, when we have let this boy keep his head and this woman keep her jewels and your kindness, what then? Tywin Lannister rides. The Tyrells plant fast. The Reach feeds the city and the city will want them. What then? Then you are a king among many rooms, Varys said. Kings who keep their rooms keep their years. Kings who break doors to show they can break doors will show their enemies what must be done to them. I am not your counselor, your grace, but I am a reader of such things. Why not simply leave the door shut and let us knock it down? Brynden asked. Then you will not have to explain your hand when men ask where it was. I am in the habit of explaining my hands, Varys said wryly. I find I have so many of them. May I send a word to the Queen, your grace? Robb looked at the guards' line again. They had shifted their weight, their pretty line wavering at its edges. He could feel the whole city leaning toward the red keep like wheat toward the way the wind blows most. Gray Wind pressed his flank against the horse's stirrup and breathed a deep, adjusting breath as if aligning himself with some line of force in the ground. Send it, Robb said. Varys inclined his head. The brown robe made no sound as he moved back through the door, and for a moment there was nothing but the huff of horses and the low sounds men make under their breath when they are told to wait in the cold with fear and pride both in their mouths. Robb put his helmet on again. The world narrowed. He touched Gray Wind with the toe of his boot and the wolf slunk forward 3 paces, each foot put down as carefully as words in a letter to a man who might kill you for a misstroke. When he stopped, the guards' horses quivered, picking up a scent whose meaning they had forgotten and remembered in the same heartbeat. Hold, Robb said, and he did not have to shout. Inside Maegor's holdfast, sounds carried oddly through courtyards and galleries, as if the stone had learned not to pass news in a straightforward way. Sansa moved with the women like a leaf among other leaves. She had learned how to walk and not be seen walking, how to lower her gaze in a way that let her see more, not less. The Queen was composed as glass. Her movements carried the precise economy of a woman who knew herself watched by enemies even when none were in the room. Marjorie stood a little apart, her hands folded at her waist, her neck tied with a ribbon of Reach green. Loras Tyrell was not there. Sansa had asked softly and been told softer that he was with his men, that he had gone to steady something that needed steadiness. Joffrey had gone white and then red and then white again, a boy flickering in his own vanity like a candle in a draft. They cannot be here, Joffrey said, running the point of a dagger under his nails as if he could pare his fear away. It's the wolves. The wolves do not climb stone. They do not have to, Cersei said, smooth. A city is more than stone. Sit, Joffrey. I am the king, he said hotly, and Sansa said a prayer with no words in it for the next breath of her life. You are, Cersei said. Sit. He sat with such obedience that it made Sansa ache in some place she had not known was in her. The ache held many things. Pity and scorn and a long habit of fear and a prick of love that had never had place to grow and now would not die. A knot of feeling that unmade and remade itself with every minute of this war. Cersei's hand found Sansa's elbow in that artlessly intimate way she had when the room was thick with fear, as if she could make a charm of female touch and draw from the girl a warmth that the world would not give her. Sansa kept her arm steady and let herself be used like furniture would be used, remembering that people alive inside a city choose what they can. Listen, Marjorie said. Her voice was the sound of clean water poured from a tall pitcher. They all stopped speaking and listened. Under the bells, under the noise of men and their iron and their breath and their intent, there was a hum, like bees working in the walls of an old house. Soldiers, Cersei said. Our soldiers. She spoke it with the confidence of a spell. Sansa closed her eyes. In the dark behind her lids, she saw Winterfell's walls, and the way the morning had burned on them when she was very small and had thought them taller than the sky. She saw the godswood and the red leaves and her father's face set in a look that she could never quite bring back fully now that she needed it. She saw Arya's dirty knees and heard her laugh. She counted under her breath to steady herself, the first thing her father had taught all his children, to count until your fear fits inside a number. A scullion ran through the hall in a ricochet of clogs, dropping a wooden bowl that cracked and spun to a stop like a top giving up. The noise made them all turn their heads. The boy's face had mud on it, and his nose run red. He stared at the queen as if he had found himself suddenly in a story and could not remember the next line. "Out," Cersei said, no louder than a whisper. The boy fled, leaving a spatter of water and broken crockery. "It will be well," Marjorie said to Sansa, very softly. "Whatever happens, we will make it well." There was no kindness in the words and no lie either. It was a statum, end of practice, as if she spoke of cutting sleeves to make them neat. Sansa looked at her and understood for the first time that the girl was very good at this, at being inside a story and teaching it which way to go. "Varys will come," Cersei said to nobody and to everyone. The way she said his name made it both promise and threat. Sansa thought of the eunuch's soft steps on the stone and the way he watched the air in rooms as if the air spoke in sentences he could hear. Joffrey's foot jiggled under the chair. The guards shifted. Someone outside sent a message with a ring against a lantern, 3 quick taps and 2 slower. Sansa's heart had begun to pace in a way that felt like running on stairs. In the room where Tyrion Lannister lay looking out of his one good eye at a piece of ceiling where time had made a stain in the shape of some animal he could not name, Podrick Payne stood with a cup and looked like a boy waiting in the wrong place for a thing he didn't understand. Tyrion had woken to the bells and to a pain that moved across his face with each breath he took. A pain that made the world very clean. Pain is a tyrant that takes all the small rebellion out of a day, leaving only the one question: will you go on? "Pod," Tyrion said, his voice hoarse. "What color are our banners this morning?" Podrick swallowed. He had put on his good cloak without noticing, and it hung off his shoulders like a net someone had thrown wrong. "Red, my lord," he said, and then blushed as if he had said something foolish. "Gold. Lannister red and gold, my lord." "Ah," Tyrion said. He tried to sit up, and something in his ribs warned him about the folly. "No change in the weather, then." Podrick held the cup nearer. "Wine, my lord." "No," Tyrion said, surprising them both. "Bring me my boots, and bring me my head if you can find where I put it last night." Pod turned about as if boots and heads were stored by category somewhere in the tower. Tyrion listened to the bells and found in their insistence an old memory. His father's voice calling him to table, the way the Lannister servants moved like chess pieces, always knowing where the next square lay. He thought of his sister's hands, of his father's expression when he was told a thing he could not abide but must. He thought of the Stark boy with the wolf and the clean, northern look in his eyes. "Pod," he said as the boy struggled with the straps. "If you hear that we are to keep the holdfast at all costs, run. Do you hear me? Do not stop for gold or glory. Run until your legs are water. Then crawl." Podrick's eyes grew very round. "My lord, do you have someone to run to?" Tyrion asked, surprising himself again by the gentleness in his voice. "My aunt," Pod said uncertainly. "In the city. She sells oranges." "Then run to the smell of citrus," Tyrion said. "At the worst, she will make you eat something good before they hang you. At the best, she will hide you and make you work for your bread like a proper human being." Pod looked as if he might cry or salute or both. "My lord," he said, and bent to the buckles with hands that shook. Tyrion found his cane and took it. He stood with the slowness old men use and did not flinch at his own weakness. He had been weak before and learned how to carry it like another limb. He walked into a world made of stone and breath and blood and his own stubbornness, and it welcomed him no more than any of the others he had walked into and bent to his will. On the Barbican, the door opened as Varys had predicted it would, not wide but enough for a conversation to believe itself safe. A Lannister man in a captain's cloak stepped into the space between the two doors and looked at Robb the way men look at a problem sent to them by someone they call master. The man's face wore fatigue like a fine linen shirt. "You will not find me rude if I do not bow," he said. "The times do not allow for it." "I am content with a nod," Robb said, because it cost him nothing and it seated something polite in the air where rage might have sat instead. The captain nodded. "Her Grace will speak in the Hall of Lamps within the holdfast," he said. "You may bring 3 men. Your host will remain where it is." "3," Brynden repeated as if making a list. "Your eunuch counts as none, I suppose." "Master Varys is an arrangement," the captain said with surprising candor. "He is never counted and always present. Make what sense of that you will." Robb dismounted. Gray wind glided at his knee like a coin of shadow. Brynden stepped down, and with him came Reed, whose green-gray cloak always looked to Tyrion's eye like a thing grown instead of sewn, and Roose Bolton, who glanced at the door with a faint, private smile that tried to be no expression at all. "No," Robb said to Bolton before the Lord of the Dreadfort had opened his mouth. He did it gently and with absolute certainty. "You will stay." For a moment, the pale eyes regarded him as if he were a specimen rather than a king, and then Bolton bowed with a perfect show of compliance, giving ground without ever having promised to hold it. "As you command, Your Grace," he said, and stepped back just enough to make Brynden take note. Reed looked unsurprised to find himself included. He took the thing as the world's version of rightness. Brynden tightened his gauntlet and rolled his shoulder in a way that said his old wounds were letting the day know where they were. The door admitted them one by one as if being polite itself. It was thicker than it looked. The air beyond it was cool and smelled of oil and clean stone. The Hall of Lamps had been built to keep shadows from gathering in the corners. 100 small flames burned in glass, and the light made the air into a lake. Cersei stood in it as if the lamps belonged to her and she owed them nothing. Sansa stood at her side and did not look at Robb because she had learned this too, to look at nothing that would show the room where her heart was. "Milady," Brynden said quietly to his niece, and Sansa's throat moved. She held herself so still that it was a kind of pain to watch. "Your Grace," Cersei said to Robb, the words mild and perfectly weighted in her mouth. "This is a morning of inconvenience. I propose we shorten it." "By yielding," Robb said. "It was not a question." "By concluding," Cersei said. "If the city must yield, let it do so without having its throat torn out. You are a boy with a wolf. I am a woman with a crown and a son with too much pride. Between us, we might make a person of some experience." There was no guard near enough to intervene if the wolf leaped. There were 50 in the next room and 50 more in the next beyond that. But this room had been left to words. Robb let his hand hang at his side where the wolf could smell his calm. He looked at Sansa then. He did not look long because the look was a hunger in him. "Lady," he said softly, because in this room with these people she was not his sister. Not yet. She was a piece on someone else's board. "You are well." She did not tremble. "I am," she said, equally soft, and did not say his name. "The boy?" Varys said with that slight, necessary cough. "The king." Joffrey had been listening from a smaller throne set to the side of the hall, a ridiculous thing that made him look very briefly like a child playing at games sober men die of. His face made and unmade itself when Robb looked at him. "Traitor," he said, because his mouth could not help itself. "We can do it this way," Cersei said, cutting across him, "or we can do it the old way. If it is to be the old way, I will have your sister's throat opened at once. That is not a threat. It is a courtesy. I will not have her used for sport. I would prefer not to kill any girl in this hall. I will if you make me." Grey Wind's head turned a fraction. The small shift gathered all the men's eyes and put them on the idea of death that lay behind Cersei's calm. Brendan's jaw tightened. "You will accept the city's surrender," Cersei went on in that same cool tone. "You will have the gates and the keys and the right to garrison men where you wish. You will have the rolls of the treasury and the lists of ships in the harbor and the right to send every singer to the countryside to tell them that the wolves have come. In return, the king will retain his life and his hair and, if we are very fortunate, his tongue. He will abdicate at the September and go with his mother to Old Town as a penitent prince. The Tyrell girl will go to her gardens and see if they will still have her. The Red Keep will serve as your court. The city will be handed to you in working order and will not have to be rebuilt at your expense. There. Terms. Brynden looked as if he would rather bite iron. Reed looked as he always did, as if he had dreamed this moment once and now simply noticed how close the dream and the day met at their hems. Robb felt the shape of the offer settle into his body with the inevitability of snow in winter. It was a trap whichever way he moved. It was also an avenue. "You propose this," he said to Cersei, "knowing that Lord Tywin will ride at me with the West at his back." She smiled with one corner of her mouth. "He will ride at you regardless," she said. "He rides at anything he cannot own. If the city loves you when he comes, it will give him smaller doors to slip through. And the Tyrells," Brynden said, "will decide whether they love my son or bread," Cersei said. "Do not look to me for their hearts. They sell them by the bushel." Varys made a neat, small sound as if in appreciation for the clean cut of her words. Sansa kept her eyes on a lamp. In its flame she saw the reflection of a boy she knew once and a man she did not, and the long road between them laid in blood and snow. "I would see my sister," Robb said. He said it in such a way that it made room for every other thing in the room to get out of its way. Cersei glanced around as if she were a hostess asked for a dish she had not planned to serve but happened to have in her pantry anyway. She lifted her hand. Sansa took a step forward. She moved with a court's grace, which is to say she moved like a bird that has learned to walk rather than fly. She stopped at the distance proper to a lady and a king. "Robb," she said, and now the word came as if it had torn a veil and would pay for the tearing with her breath later. He had not known how quickly he would move until he had moved. He did not step to her. He did not reach for her. He only bent his head so that all the men in that room could have their hearts break around the quiet of it. Gray wind came close and breathed Sansa's skirts in, sorting the story of the last year with his nose, making a low sound at the whiff of fear, anger at the scent of men who had broken laughter for sport, and something like a question at the faint ghost of winter apples that clung to her hair. "We are not done," Cersei said. The words were light, but Sansa heard in them a steel that had years of practice on it. "Will you kneel, Joffrey?" Joffrey's hands pulled at the arms of the chair. For a moment, Sansa thought he would refuse and make the day into a thing of legend the other way. Then Cersei's gaze caught him in a net. It held as strongly as any iron chain. Slowly, with a jerk that made his motions awkward, Joffrey slid off the chair and knelt. The Hall of Lamps kept its light steady, even now. Varys looked as if he had been about to do something else and would do that instead later when the day allowed. Brynden had turned his head slightly, as if to let this sight pass him by without adding itself to his burden. Reed watched as reeds do without blinking. Robb took one step forward and the wolf moved with him. He said nothing, because sometimes silence is the only word that does not break a thing worse. He stood over the kneeling boy and watched the way his shoulders shook and the way his hands moved to themselves fist inside the folds of his robe. He thought of Bran falling and of a man's head on a spike. He thought of a girl on a wall forced to look and of the taste of the letters sent from the north after that. "Bring a septon," Cersei said. "Bring a quill. It should look like ceremony. Everything should look like what it pretends to be." It took time, and in that time the city grew used to the idea of being conquered and began to reassemble itself around it as cities do when they are wise. Men outside shouted less and spoke more. The bells found a rhythm that belonged to early morning instead of riot. A woman swept a step. A baker threw salt, and the smell of bread trying to be born cut through the smell of fear. Soldiers set up tables. A boy ran messages with the careful gait people use when told not to run and needing to. On the way to the September of Baelor, they passed small things that will be remembered better than the grander moments. A dog lay sleeping with its head on the boot of a dead man as if the leather were a pillow. A girl in a green dress with a tear down the front stood on a threshold and counted the men going by in a whisper, her lips forming the numbers. A man with a broken lute sat with it in his lap, as if the thing might sing when the world had finished speaking. Gray wind trotted with his mouth slightly open so that he looked as if he were smiling. The sunlight made itself known with a sudden earnestness, the mist drawing back to the river like a thing with a mind. In the September, the mother looked down as she always did, her stone face kind because it had been carved by hands that knew what kindness must be asked for. Robb had been in places of prayer that smelled of iron and snow. This place smelled of beeswax and old silk and the breath of 1,000 confessions, and something about it made his throat go tight. Joffrey knelt again. The Septon's voice moved through the air the way a ship rides a small wave. It rose and fell and took its own time. Sansa stood very straight, her hands laced. Her eyes on the floor where little chips of colored stone made patterns set by craftsmen who had not thought of wolves. Cersei's hand lay on Joffrey's shoulder. Her face was still, and the stillness was made of more effort than all the motion in the square outside. Varys stood near a pillar as if he had been put there by a painter to balance the composition. "By the old gods and the new," the Septon said. "By the laws of men and the mercy that makes laws bearable. A boy renounces a burden that he was not born fit to carry, and a city is spared a hunger it cannot afford." Joffrey spoke the words he was told to speak. He fumbled once, and Cersei's grip tightened, her fingers a small pain that drew him back into the rhythm. He set his name to the parchment with a letter that started too large and corrected itself. The crown in question lay on a cushion that smelled faintly of lavender. It looked almost innocent when it did not sit on anyone's head. When it was done, nothing changed, and then, immediately, everything had. The air in the September seemed to loosen. The city outside breathed differently. The Septon let out an audible breath that made him look human for the first time in Sansa's memory. A murmur went around like wind in grass. Cersei exhaled and closed her eyes, and the moment when she might have ordered the girl's throat opened had passed and become legend of a different shape. Robb did not take up the crown. He did not even look at it long. He lifted his head and looked at the mother and then at the girl who had once made a little song of the way a dog trotted in the snow behind her, and he allowed himself, only then, only there, the smallest of expressions. It moved one corner of his mouth, barely. Sansa's gaze met his and this time did not look away. It was nothing. It was time's hinge. It was the bit of light under a door that says someone is awake. Outside, the great Jon was making jokes again and making his men laugh, because laughter is a kind of water you must pour into a place that has too much fire. Lord Karstark had found a quiet shadow where he could be alone with his account book of wrongs. Roose Bolton had a piece of paper from a quill cutter and was wrapping it around his thumb to make a cap. His face gentle as a midwife's and as unreadable. Men from the City Watch were being given back their halberds with the kind of ceremony that makes small things mean what they must. Reed was already talking softly to men who made maps with their feet, teaching them a path up a hill that the next day might need them to run it without looking. Tyrion arrived at the steps of the September leaning on his cane, his breath a bargain with the day. He looked up at the statue of the father and smirked without mirth at the square jaw, and then he looked at the wolves on the banners and had the oddest sensation that he had seen them before. In a story told long ago, where wolves stood by a hearth and listened to a man's voice speaking of truth. He felt a pang for a father who had given him cleverness numberless times and never kindness. And he wondered what the city would do now that it had been handed like a bowl to a boy from the snow. He saw Sansa coming down the steps at the edge of a group of ladies, saw the wolf at her knee. That was new, that was startling, and felt, against his own will, the catch in his breath that something like relief makes. She was alive. She was in a new kind of danger, but that was the only kind there was. "Lord Tyrion," she said as she reached him, and inclined her head with perfect courtesy, as if none of the last year had been made of madness and iron. "My lady," he said. He wanted to ask her if she needed help. He wanted to do something enormous and impossible like give her back a father. Instead, he bowed as well as his ribs would allow. "The city becomes you." She might have smiled. It might have been only the slip of light on her cheeks. "The city changes," she said. "I will change with it." "Wise," he said softly. "The unwise thing is to expect the city to change with you." She looked past him then to where Robb stood with his mother. Caitlin's hand was on her son's arm now, the touch not furniture but family. The wolf sat on its haunches like a promise. Sansa lowered her eyes and Tyrion saw her hold something tight inside herself with a skill he had seen people in brothels use when they pretended to feel one thing while feeling another. He did not want to think of Sansa and brothels in the same sentence. He let the thought go like a bird. "Go to your aunt," he said. "If you still have an aunt to go to." She blinked. "My aunt? I imagine you have no more aunts than I have honest uncles," he said dryly. "But it sounded kindly in my head. I find my kindness gets stuck on the way out." She almost smiled this time. "You are kind," she said, and left him with the lie that made the air easier to breathe. Robb found himself again in the Hall of Lamps with Cersei Lannister in a room that now held less danger and more consequence. Varys arranged parchment with the innocent competence of a clerk and made notes as if the present tense took dictation from him. Brynden had, without comment, moved men to places where men should be and had not been allowed to be an hour ago. "Your mother," Cersei said, a question made to look like a courtesy. "With me," Robb said. "And the northern lords who think you are a story," she said, as if she were making sure she had the nouns correct. "They will want spoils. There are rooms in this city that are spoils. There are women. There are children. There are cellars made of wine. I would prefer the cellars remain. I would prefer the children remain in their skins." "So would I," Robb said. He felt older than the boy who had stood with the wolf at dawn. He felt, too, the boy still under the king, as a bone is under the flesh until the day it breaks. "Put men like the one with the green eyes in the streets," Cersei said, as if planning a reception. "The small ones who know water. They will not set fires where a bigger man thinks a blaze looks like victory." "Read," Robb said. "Yes." She drew a breath as if she had been about to make a remark and had decided not to. "I will go to my rooms," she said. "I will take my son. I will take my daughter. I will take my father's portrait and the box of letters he wrote me to make me into the thing I am. I will take what jewelry I think I can sell in Old Town to pay for a roof. I will leave you the rest. Is that adequate?" "It is more than I expected," Robb said truthfully. She smiled in such a way that made him think there were a dozen ways to read the expression and he would not pick the right one. "I prefer men to owe me what they cannot name," she said. "It matures better than coin." And then, as if pulled by a string none of them could see, the day stepped to its next square. A messenger ran with the speed of a man running for his own life and not another's. He reached the door, caught his breath on its threshold, and spoke to Varys, who softened as if he had just remembered he was human and not a system. "What?" Brynden said. He had learned to make that one word hold the weight of an army. "The West?" Varys said, the corners of his mouth turning down at last. "Ravens speak of banners on the Gold Road. The lion comes. He has eaten his breakfast." "His pace?" Brynden asked. "Poor men say fast," Varys said. "Rich men say moderate. Both are frightened. It is difficult to tell." Cersei closed her eyes, and for a moment she was a woman whose son had knelt and whose father was a weather pattern. She opened them again, and the queen returned to her face like a headpiece set back in place. "May I suggest," she said, not looking at Robb, "that the boy who is no longer a king travel downriver, not by road, and that his boat leave before sunset if you wanted to arrive anywhere that is not a story told in anger." Robb could feel the room wanting to have the argument with him. He could feel it in his bones as a tremor not caused by any man's footfall. He did not want Joffrey to live. He did not want the boy dead and carved into a principle he had to carry. He wanted something he could have and hold and not pay for 5 years later. He wanted a hand with all its fingers. He wanted Winterfell the way it had been and would never be again. "Send the boat," he said. "Read, put eyes at the Rose Road and the River Gate. Brynden, take the men who need to feel the day and set them along the streets where they can be seen. I want bread baked. I want the smiths paid. I want a singer to stand on every corner and sing the same song until I tell them to sing another." "What song?" Brynden said without irony. "Tell them to sing about hunger ending," Robb said, and surprised even himself. Tell them to sing about doors being left at night with only a latch. Tell them to sing about boys with slings and girls with brooms. Tell them to sing about the wolf that does not bite children. Tell them to sing about the fish that does not rot. And then tell them to sing about work. Brendan's mouth twitched in what served him as a grin. He said, that will be a popular song. Sansa stood at the edge of that room and watched the orders of a new day set themselves like tableware. She had watched before as people arranged rooms to their own advantage. She saw that Robb, who was her brother, was also a man who had learned to put forks and knives where guests would assume they had always belonged. She felt, suddenly and without warning, a welling of grief that was not for any one thing. It was for the sum of things, for the distance from the tree under which she had read simple tales to the room in which she had to calculate where to stand so that men would not put their fear into her shoulders. It rose so quickly that she thought she might drown in it standing up. Then, it receded like a tide, leaving her steadier than she had any right to be. On the river, the mist gathered itself for a last curtsy and withdrew. The sun woke, fully this time, and threw gold over the water in a way that made men remember why poets live so long on what should kill them. The skiffs that had brought wolves into the heart of a city rocked gently at their moorings as if surprised at their own histories. A barge took on supplies with the unremarkable noisiness of men handling boxes. Joffrey Baratheon, who was no longer a king, stood in the shadow of a bower and tried not to be looked at, and for once succeeded. The first day of the city under a new song is always too quiet and too loud in turns. Men look at their hands and at the sky more than they have cause. Women make 3 loaves when one would do. The men who would do bad things to prove to themselves that they can are watched by men who have learned to make a quiet come into a room where loudness wants to be born. Tyrion found a stool under a window and sat and drank water and wondered if somewhere in the city a dwarf baker was making a cake and if that would balance the world. In the Red Keep, letters were written and sealed, and a dozen ravens took new shapes under their feet as they stood on different perches. A clerk cried because he had not slept and because the last letter he had been asked to write at such speed had been a death writ. He wrote 3 names wrong and corrected them and wondered if the gods counted such mistakes. Varys sharpened a quill and thought about a tall man with a serious mouth across the sea and whether the wind favored ships that carried queens. Roose Bolton walked into the armory and smiled at the way men stepped back from him without knowing they had stepped. He laid a hand on a blade and then did not take it. He looked up at the rafters as if reading a sign nobody else could see. He left as quietly as he had come, his pale eyes unreadable, his thumb still ringed with the paper cap. Catelyn found a room that looked east and sat on the window seat with her hands wrapped in her cloak and watched the city teach itself the new law. She had spent too many nights in rooms that did not know who she was. This one knew her. She felt, against her careful heart, the old sensation of being in a home built by men who meant it, and she let herself feel it because she might not get to feel it again. In the God's Wood of the Red Keep, such as it was, she stood later and tried to pray, but the trees here were the wrong kind. She spoke to the air and hoped her words would know their way to the right ears. On the Street of Steel, the armorer who had kept hammering when the army came began to hammer again, and the sound was now the sound of work and not war. A woman hung shirts with a new briskness and told her children they had better manners now that a wolf was in the palace. A fishmonger counted coins and thought about how many would be taken from him and decided it was the same as always and went home because he did not want to be on the street when night begun. An old man who had been a mason put his hand on a wall and told it, quietly, that it had done well. As the sun moved, the city shifted into the shape of a place that had been taken and was learning to live with being owned by someone who had not slit its throat on the way in. The ships in the harbor rocked as if applauding. Far off, a dust cloud on the Gold Road formed and held and changed and did not come any nearer yet. It was like a dog at a distance, whether friend or foe you could not tell yet, only that it was a creature that would need feeding. In a room where no one had yet thought to sweep the last of the evening's ashes, Sansa sat with Marjorie and a Septa whose hands shook but whose voice did not. Marjorie was telling a story about a particular breed of rose that bends before a wind to survive a storm and then stands again in the morning as if nothing had happened. Sansa understood the lesson and was grateful for the rose. She was tired of being told to be a stone. "Will you go to Old Town?" Sansa asked. With their procession, Marjorie's smile held compassion, assessment, and a private humor all at once. "We will see," she said. "When gardens change hands, there is always a question as to who tends them. I will keep my trowel clean." Sansa nodded. It was not an answer, and it was the only one that could be given in a room with a painting of some ancestor pretending to read a book while staring nobly off to the left. She picked at the hem of her sleeve and found herself with a stray thread that would make itself known if she did not fix it. She knotted it. She had learned to mend, and she was glad of it in a way that would have astonished a younger version of herself. At sundown, a skiff slipped down the Blackwater, another behind it, the river licking its sides like a well-trained hound. In the first sat a queen with a face made of policies and a boy who had begun to understand that being looked at could be worse than being beaten. Jaime Lannister was far away from them, but Cersei glanced over her shoulder as if she could make a boat go faster by looking at the place it was meant to arrive. She had wrapped her jewels tightly against her belly, and they felt cold through the cloth. In the city left behind, night lamps were lit, and the Hall of Lamps lived up to its name and more. A wolf slept on the threshold of a room where a king with new cares lay down and did not sleep. The wolf dreamed of snow and running at the edge of a river that smelled like home. The king dreamed of his father's voice and of a hall made of wood and of a girl's hand small in his when she was first learning to dance. He woke twice and each time told himself he had not cried out. Tyrion, drinking a measured amount of wine now, sat with a map and wondered where he belonged on it. He had been master of coin and master of whispers and master of survive. Al and now felt like a man with a talent nobody wanted to pay for. He traced with a finger the way to the wall and thought about letters to a bastard who was not one in any way that mattered. He traced the way to the west and thought of a father whose footsteps he had walked behind for too long. He traced the river and thought of a woman who had told him a truth and he had punished her for it because he had not known what else to do with the pain. Reed spoke to men whose feet knew marsh and men whose feet knew stone. He found a common map in their souls. He placed eyes where eyes should go. He set watchers to watch watchers. He told boys with good ears what the sound of an approaching army was like at a distance you cannot see. He told a story about fog and how it becomes your ally when you let it keep you from shouting. Brynden made lists and then crossed items off. He had a way of telling a man he had done well that made the man's back straighten and his work improve. He sent 3 riders to 3 different corners of the city with 3 different commands. He sat once, unexpectedly, on a stone and rubbed his knee for a long moment, then stood and did not sit again until the hour required it. Roose Bolton watched the sunset as if it were a patient whose fever he had learned. He smiled against the light. He left a small knife very deliberately on a table where he knew a certain sort of man would take it. He walked through a street that had known him for an hour and yet made way for him as if he had been their lord for a year. Catelyn went to the hill on which the September stood and looked out over the city and the river and the small, plain fact that victory and loss smell the same at the end of a day. She thought of Edmure's wedding. She thought of bridges and of old men who did not forget slights. She thought of a feast hall with bread and salt and wondered at the shape of the world where such old laws had begun to break. She put her hand on the wall and felt how the stones were warmer now than they had been at dawn. Sansa stood in a gallery where wind could sometimes be persuaded to enter. She closed her eyes and spoke aloud very quietly, knowing that in this place even whispers make networks. She spoke the words of the old gods and then, to be safe, the ones of the new as well. She asked for nothing she could not pay for. Robb came to her without attendance the way a boy goes to a place he used to hide in. He stopped a courteous distance away and did not reach for her. He looked at her with a sort of hunger that is almost shame. She looked back at him with a sort of forgiveness that is almost anger. They both laughed once, small and helpless and true. "You are alive," he said, because sometimes stating a fact is the most gratitude men can wrestle into words. "I am," she said. "You are a king." "I am a boy who knocked on a door," he said. "The door opened and asked me for a price. I paid the part of it the door would take. And the rest," she said, "will come on the morrow," he said, "and the next day, and the day after, and men will sing, she said, perhaps in jest. I told them to, he said, not in jest. And she let the laugh escape her for real this time, short and bright. And it drew a guard's curious glance from the far end of the gallery, and then sent him about his business, because laughter is not a crime yet in any city worth the name. They spoke then of small things, because small things are what keep a person at the edge of themselves when the center is demanded elsewhere. They spoke of a baker's smell that morning, of a cat that had taken to sleeping on a step where 10 men had tripped on it without kicking it, of the way the river looked when the sun stood up from it like a man leaving a bed. When they parted, they did not touch. There were eyes in the stone. There were men who would turn any touch into law. They walked away from each other with such grace that it looked like practice and was. Night found the city sitting up late with its new lord. In the dark, men told stories to one another, about the wolf that had looked at them in the street and not killed them, about the red woman someone had seen on a corner though she had not been there, about the way a boy king had knelt without crying, which was true and not true depending on where you stood. Up on Aegon's high hill, a boy who was not a king had nightmares and bit his own hand to keep from waking the boatman. Out beyond the gold road, dust lay down like a tired dog and slept, and the men making it slept as well, and dreamt of a city with doors they had not yet seen. In a small chamber, Robb sat with his mother and let the day put itself into words. He put it slowly into the kind of sentences a person uses when they do not want to bruise a thing that has just stopped bleeding. Catelyn listened as women who have seen too much of war listen, with an ear for what is not said, with a patience the day had not earned. Before the wedding, she said, shaping the words carefully, tasting them for omen. Before the crossing, he looked at her. The room had a window that looked on the river, and the sound of it made a low speech in the background of everything else. Before, he said. Nothing is paid, she said. Everything is bought, but nothing is paid. He reached for her hand then and took it. Her hand was warm and dry and calloused in a place that men forget exists, a spot made by the way women hold their grief. They sat like that until the lamps burned low and sleep came and stood in the doorway, neither enterprising nor kind. On the wall, the wolf standard moved in a wind that had found its way through a seam. Below it, a city learned a new song, and in the distance, beyond the lights, a horizon held a lion that had not yet shown its teeth. The river rolled the darkness down toward the sea. Somewhere in a far country of air, the first raven of the next day rose from its perch, shook its feathers, and set out over roofs and rivers to tell the next piece of the story to whoever had paid for it.